Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC on ABC3, Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this amazing featherweight matchup. This main card will be on ABC as well as ESPN+, and this is a fight that I'm really looking forward to, and I know why they put it on ABC3. These are two elite of the elite at 145 pounds. They both are absolute savages, and there is no way that this main event sucks. And also, it has massive implications in the division. I doubt Brian Ortega with the win is going to get a shot at Volk again, after what just happened at UFC 266. I think it was back in September of last year. But if Yair Rodriguez wins, that would be a fresh matchup for Alexander Volkanovski. He wants to stay active. I think a lot of fans and the UFC in general would prefer to see a Volkanovski versus Rodriguez matchup over a potential Volk versus Emmett matchup, even though Emmett probably deserves it more. But if Yair Rodriguez goes out there, puts on an amazing performance, and maybe gets a stoppage win over Brian Ortega, I could totally see him being the #1 contender in the featherweight division. And also, you have looming out there, Alexander Volkanovski may move up to lightweight. So the winner of this fight could potentially be in a vacant title fight if Alexander Volkanovski does move up to lightweight. So this is a very important fight. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, Brian Ortega is ranked number 2 in the UFC official rankings. Yair Rodriguez is ranked number 3. Ortega is 31. Rodriguez is 29. Ortega is 5'8". Rodriguez is 5'11". Ortega has a 69-inch reach, and Rodriguez has a 71-inch reach. So a height and reach advantage for Yair Rodriguez in this fight. If you look at Brian Ortega, he's coming in on this fight. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. His last fight was at UFC 266 against Alexander Volkanovski, a title shot in the featherweight division. And I know a lot of people talk about this fight as, oh, this was one of the best fights of 2021. And it was a very good fight. And, the first and second round were rather competitive. And then you had those moments in the third round where Ortega got very close to a mounted guillotine, and then he got close to a triangle. But outside of that, this was a one-sided beating by Alexander Volkanovski. And not only that, this was a career-altering beating. I mean, Ortega took a lot of damage in that third and fourth round. I thought, his corner would stop it. I thought the doctor would stop it. I thought Herb Dean might stop it. And I really think his corner kind of did him a disservice in this fight, because after that third round where he tried the submission attempts and then he got smashed as he was stacked in guard, I really don't think he had much left in him. And he took a lot of damage in that fourth. And he took so much damage. We know how good Alexander Volkanovski's cardio is. Alexander Volkanovski might have lost the fifth round because he was tired from smashing Ortega in that third and fourth round. And also, you had the fact that Ortega, I guess probably was had a little bit better stamina in that fifth round, just because he was the one getting smashed rather than putting out any output in that third and fourth round. Before that, he returned against Chan Sung Jung. This was a phenomenal performance. I actually thought Chan Sung Jung was going to win this fight. This was in October of 2020, so not super active of Ortega in this fight. I mean, he just outclassed the Korean Zombie. The first round was kind of competitive. I can't remember which round it was, but Brian Ortega rocked him with a spinning elbow. And after that, it was pretty much over for the Korean Zombie. Ortega was outstriking him, outgrappling him, and this was a dominant performance for Brian Ortega. Before that was all the way back in December of 2018 against Max Holloway. And this was another title shot for Brian Ortega. So 2 title shots in 3 fights for Brian Ortega. And in this fight, I mean, he got decimated by Max Holloway. A career-altering beating by Max Holloway. I mean, he took so much damage in this fight, and eventually the doctor stopped it at the end of the fourth round. But, I mean, this was a brutal one-sided beatdown from Max. I'm glad that he took, almost 2 years off before he came back and fought the Korean Zombie, because it was so much damage to take in that Max Holloway fight. He was landing so many combinations, and Ortega just could not keep up with him. Before that, a KO win over Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar came in on short notice. Before that, a submission win over Cub Swanson. But then you're starting to get back into 2017. He's changed so much as a fighter and improved so much over the last 5 years. I don't really know if those wins really mean a lot. But arguably, even though I consider Brian Ortega one of the best 145ers, doesn't have a great resume. I was actually surprised when I looked back. What's his best win? An aging Chan Sung Jung would be his best win in my opinion. The Frankie Edgar win was decent. Don't get me wrong. Frankie Edgar's a former lightweight champion, but still, an aging Frankie Edgar, and I know that was 4 years ago at this point. And also another thing to look at, and I mentioned it before, the activity. I mean, since the end of 2018, he's only fought twice. So, I mean, that's coming up, on 3.5 years or so, that he's only fought 2 times. And I'm going to talk about Yair Rodriguez in a second. Very similar situation with him. Not a lot of great wins, but if you look at his pro career, he has 18 pro fights, 15 wins, only 2 losses. And his only 2 losses are to Volkanovski and Max Holloway. Not too bad losses to have. 2 of the elite at 145 pounds. Of his 15 wins, 3 by knockout, 7 by submission, 5 by decision. We know what Brian Ortega wants to win by. He wants to get a submission in each and every fight. Moving on to Yair Rodriguez, his last fight was in November of 2021 against Max Holloway, former featherweight champion. And a lot of people going into this fight thought that Max Holloway would beat the brakes off of Yair Rodriguez. I thought it would probably be a late round stoppage for Max Holloway. I didn't trust Yair's cardio. And, in this fight, I was really surprised. Yair Rodriguez won the first round and arguably won the 5th round as well. Max Holloway won 2, 3, and 4. But this was a very competitive fight throughout. And it was just a bit of a trouble for Yair Rodriguez dealing with the pressure and the volume of Max Holloway. But he didn't do a half bad job in the first round. He was landing some nasty calf kicks. No matter how much damage he took, he was always throwing back. He was landing on Max Holloway. There was a couple moments where he ended up in bad positions on the ground. I think it was in the 2nd round. He ended up full mounted by Max Holloway, giving up his back. Every single time this ended up, happening to him, he scrambled back to his feet, didn't have a lot of trouble with it. He took a decent amount of damage. This was, kind of a war, but not a ridiculous amount of damage. And we know Max Holloway doesn't have like crazy power. And it's not like Yair Rodriguez was getting rocked throughout this fight. But this was one of those fights that I think does take something away from you as far as career-wise. Just like I was talking about Brian Ortega and the Max Holloway fight and the Volkanovski fight. This was a wild fight. But for Yair Rodriguez to go out there and arguably win the 5th round against Max Holloway, I just think is insane. And it's weird how these guys are very similar in different things I'm talking about, whether it be the resume, whether it be the inactivity, whether it be both of them arguably taking a 5th round, Ortega off of Volkanovski and Yair off of Max Holloway. That is just insanity. Before that, he has a win over Jeremy Stephens back in October of 2019, off for over 2 years before he fought Max Holloway. That's another thing. Yair Rodriguez was off for 2 years coming off an injury and accepts a fight with Max Holloway. And I mean, that's a tough fight to come back to. Before that, a no contest against Jeremy Stephens. That's where the eye poke happened in the first 10 seconds. He eye poked Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens couldn't continue. They rescheduled it for a couple weeks later. And then he went out there and just outclassed Jeremy Stephens, won via decision. Before that, he beat Chan Sung Jung. That was in November of 2018. That fight was very competitive. Chan Sung Jung was winning. He was up on the scorecards. He rushed forward in the last few seconds of the 5th round. And Yair landed that nasty upward elbow and slept the Korean Zombie with 1 second to go in the 5th round of a fight that he was going to lose on the scorecards. And if you look at Yair Rodriguez's resume, same thing I said with Brian Ortega, I believe Yair Rodriguez is one of the best fighters at 145 pounds, but Yair Rodriguez has an awful resume. You look through his wins, I mean, what's his best win? I guess the Chan Sung Jung win. That's his best, the best fighter he's beaten. But he arguably lost that fight, and without that Hail Mary upward elbow at the end, he's going to lose on the scorecard. So, maybe you exclude that one. What's his next best win? I don't know. BJ Penn, an aging, unretired BJ Penn, who I can't believe they fed to a young Yair Rodriguez. He destroyed BJ Penn. He lost to Frankie Edgar back in 2017, just out-grappled, got beat up. It ended up being a doctor stoppage. I can't remember exactly what happened, but he just got out-wrestled and ground and pound in that fight. And to lose to Frankie Edgar, I mean, I know it's back in 2017 when Frankie Edgar's a little bit better, but still, it's not prime Frankie Edgar, in my opinion. And you look down the resume, just not a good resume. A split decision win over Alex Caceres, not bad. A KO win over Andre Fili, that's a great win. A win over Dan Hooker, decent. But again, for number 3 ranked featherweight in the world, not a great resume. And also look at the inactivity. Since 2018, he's really only fought twice, because the Jeremy Stephens fight, the no contest, really doesn't count. That ended literally a couple seconds into the fight. Nothing was really thrown. And then he fought Jeremy Stephens, won, and then he fought Max Holloway in 2021. So to only fight twice since the end of 2018, I mean, the inactivity is just unreal. And at least he's being a little bit more active. He fought in November. Now he's fighting in July against Brian Ortega. So I guess, he kind of got back, shook off some of the ring rust against Max Holloway, and now he's fighting Brian Ortega. If you look at Yair Rodriguez's pro record, he has 17 pro fights, 13 wins, 3 losses. 2 losses within the UFC. Those 2 losses are to Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar. Max Holloway fight, again, very competitive. Arguably took 2 rounds off of Max Holloway. The other fight where he was just out-grappled by Frankie Edgar and lost, but that was all the way back in 2017. So not the worst losses to have, but again, not a great resume. Now, when I look at this fight and I try to anticipate what happens in this fight and break down my prediction, I think this is a very close fight. I think this is a 50-50 fight, because I feel like Brian Ortega's striking has been ever evolving since, that loss to Max Holloway. His striking has got significantly better. He took that 2 years off after Max Holloway. He came back, and his striking looked so good against the Korean Zombie. But he did rock the Korean Zombie early in that fight, and you wonder, was the Korean Zombie maybe out on his feet? But you also look at Brian Ortega and the submission game of Brian Ortega, the way he will just snatch up your neck so quick or lock up a triangle so quick. His submissions are the elite of the elite. He may have the best BJJ in all the UFC. And you look at Yair Rodriguez, he got taken down by Max Holloway in his last fight, multiple times. He ended up in bad positions. He was full mounted by Max Holloway. Max Holloway had his back on multiple occasions in the fight. And if Brian Ortega gets you in those positions, it's not going to end well for you. But Yair Rodriguez has very good striking. I think he has the edge in the striking. His hands are ever improving. I think him and Brian Ortega's hands are probably about the same level. But where Yair Rodriguez has the advantage, his kicks are absolutely amazing. He doesn't telegraph them at all. He has nasty power in his kicks. He's super flashy, super fast. He has a variety of attacks. He will chop your legs. He will chop your body. He'll throw spinning wheel kicks. Yair Rodriguez might have the best kicks in the UFC. And both these guys are so durable. I mean, Yair Rodriguez ate some big shots in the Max Holloway fight. I know Max Holloway doesn't have the craziest power, but there was multiple times in that fight, in the 3rd, 4th round, where he was getting kind of blasted against the fence, and I'm thinking, okay, is it going to be one of those times where the fighter just kind of packs it in? Okay, I'm going to get TKO'd up against the fence here. And Yair Rodriguez would eat shots, and he'd be just fine throwing some back. He will eat a shot to land a shot. And Brian Ortega, there's absolutely no quit in Brian Ortega. There was multiple times Herb Dean was checking on him in between rounds in the Volkanovski fight. And, he was like, I'm good. I'm ready to go. I'm good. He was saying the wrong numbers when Herb Dean was holding up fingers, and somehow that slipped by Herb Dean. He wasn't paying attention or something. And he was able to continue. So neither one of these guys is, one of these guys that just is super chinny and constantly getting knocked out and finished. And neither one of these guys, I talk about it all the time. There's certain fighters, when they start losing fights, they tend to pack it in, and maybe they don't look for the win. They just look to survive the fight. That is neither one of these guys. Both of these guys will look for the finish the entire fight. So when I look at past the victory for both guys, I really see both guys can win so many different ways. I think Yair can win via decision. I think he could win via TKO. I doubt he's going to win by submission. But I see Brian Ortega, I think he can win by decision, and I also think there's a very good chance that Brian Ortega could submit Yair Rodriguez in this fight. Yair Rodriguez in the Max Holloway fight, but I don't think he's going to be doing it in this fight as much. When Max Holloway was putting the volume on him, Yair was ducking down and kind of giving up his neck. Max Holloway had a tight guillotine attempt in that fight as well, and also gave up some bad positions. But if Brian Ortega can get him to kind of duck down, Brian Ortega will snatch up a guillotine. There's no setting it up. If it's there, he will take your neck immediately. And if Brian Ortega gets the hold of your neck outside of Alexander Volkanovski, it's most likely over. I think Brian Ortega is going to come in this fight, and I think he's going to try to take Yair down, or I think he's just going to be slow and methodical and wait for an opportunity to present itself and look for a submission. Another thing I wanted to mention before I get into my official prediction, because this is a very tough fight to pick. Yair Rodriguez has to be very careful in this fight. He throws a lot of flashy spinning techniques and crazy kicks, And a lot of the times he ends up off balance and slipping down to the mat. That's what happened quite a few times. Literally, I count like 4 or 5 times. He threw a kick, he slipped, and he ended up on the ground, and Max Holloway capitalized on it. If he does that against Brian Ortega, it's probably going to be game over. But I think Yair Rodriguez is going to come into this fight, and I think he's going to be a little bit more conservative. He understands that Brian Ortega's jiu-jitsu and submission game is not to be messed with, and that's why I am going to go, my official prediction is Yair Rodriguez via 3rd round TKO. This was a tough fight to pick. Honestly, I thought about going with Brian Ortega via submission, but I know Yair got taken down by Max Holloway, and it's not like Max Holloway is some elite level grappler. But when I look at this fight, I think Yair, he had a little bit of ring rust against Max Holloway. Max Holloway's volume is way different than Brian Ortega. And I think Yair is going to come in. He's going to come in with a very smart game plan. He's going to know that Brian Ortega is looking for the submission. He's looking for the takedown. I think he's going to be a little bit more conservative. I think he's going to bust up that lead leg of Brian Ortega. Yair has some of the best leg kicks in the game. I think he's going to mix it to the body and the head as well. And I just think as the fight goes on and as, both guys start to get a little bit tired, I think that Yair's just going to land the better shots on the feet. I think he has the better striking. Not by much, but I think the kicks are what are going to make the difference in this fight. And as long as Yair doesn't make a slip up and end up slipping to the ground and then letting Ortega on top of him, I don't think he's going to get submitted. I don't think he's going to be ducking down the way he was in the Max Holloway fight because Ortega doesn't have that type of volume and pressure. The reason he was doing that in the Max Holloway fight is because Max Holloway was throwing 4 or 5 punch combinations, and he was using his head movement to avoid those combinations because Max was just relentless. Brian Ortega doesn't have that type of volume. He's throwing 1-2 punch combinations, and then he's just kind of waiting. And Brian Ortega is just super flat-footed, doesn't have great head movement, and I think Yair has better movement, better head movement. I think he's going to be chopping at the legs. I think he's going to be picking apart the body. I think he's going to be using the teeps to kind of keep Brian Ortega at range. And Yair has a style where his hands aren't particularly high. So he's already in a good position to stuff takedowns. And I think he's going to come into this fight conscious that Brian Ortega is going to be looking to get him on the ground and submit him. And I think he's going to fight super smart. And as the fight goes on, he's going to start to feel a little bit more confident that he's not going to end up on his back when Brian Ortega shoots in on a takedown. I think he's going to get the timing of Brian Ortega. And I think he's going to land a spinning wheel kick, land on Brian Ortega's chin, put him down. He's not going to knock him out. He's going to put him down and then finish him off with ground and pound. But that's another thing Yair Rodriguez has to be super careful in this fight. If you hurt Brian Ortega and he goes to his back, him and Charles Oliveira have a unique strength where if they get rocked, they can just drop to their back because a lot of people don't want to follow him there. If Yair hurts him badly, he has to be careful when he follows him to the ground. Volkanovski was smashing him in guard, and look how quick Ortega locked in that triangle choke, and it was so close, and Volkanovski could have lost his belt because of it. So Yair has to be super careful, but again, I think Yair is going to pick him apart with the kicks in this fight and eventually finish him in the 3rd round with a spinning wheel kick. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.